So, Taran, I think we could start.
Just a minute. Okay? I need to hear what Mai has to say before we start. Okay, just give me a few minutes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we will wait. Okay, thank you. May, if you want to try the sound, May, can you listen now?
I can listen, yes. If it's me you're talking to. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's with some delay, but for me it's okay.
Yeah, I can listen to you as well. So I'm just gonna unmute now.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Jaha, vad trevligt. Bekämpningsoptioner jag kan vurdera det som en och grej. Den influensen går att känna att man går alla handlingar.
So I think it's the time to start. We already have 100 participants. We wait 10 minutes. I think it's a good time to start and welcome all to this bilateral activity, to this webinar on domestic homicides review. It's a bilateral activity. The name is Retrospetiva Analysis in Domestic Violence Homicides, Research Methodologies and Good Practice. This bilateral activity is founded under the program Work-Life Balance and is supported by EEA Grants in Portugal. This activity is based on good practice exchange between Portugal and through the Commission for Citizenship and Gender Equality and the Portuguese team on retrospective analysis in domestic violence homicides. And the program partner, Equality and Anti-Discrimination Ombud, LDO, and the Norwegian Network on Preventing and Combating Domestic and Gender Violence. The aim is to allow these professionals and participants from both countries to learn from each other regarding the retrospective analysis methodology in domestic violence homicides. This activity started some months ago, and now we are promoting this webinar, and then on September we will visit Norway. The Portuguese team will visit Norway to make a training session to professionals. Portugal is one of the 8 countries in the world that has implemented this kind of domestic homicide review. The challenge started in 2017, and the aim is to decrease the number of homicides related to domestic violence, learn from those tragedies, and implement or change procedures to face the phenomenon. It is important to mention that most of the recommendations of the Portuguese Domestic Homicide Review team were implemented, which is one of the greatest difficulties identified by other teams in the world, and has contributed to positive change in several practices in courts, police, health, protection, and other sectors of the government. Today, we will listen the Portuguese and the Norwegian experience, considering in order to learn more about this path of violence and formulate recommendations with a view to prevent homicides and develop a more safer future to domestic violence victims. Now, according to the agenda, I will introduce the first speaker, Mai Schwartz, and she's a lawyer, and she's the head of the Department of the Equality and Anti-Discrimination Ombudsman. She has extensive experience with equality work, as well as law enforcement and legal guidance in case of discrimination. May, I think I will give you the floor.
I'm sorry, Joanna. I think she's still having problem with the audio. So maybe we just have to. Maybe I should just pass on greetings from her and apologize on behalf of her. She can't seem to be able to hear us, so we should just move on with the program because we're already a bit delayed. So sorry about that. But she sends her greetings.
Okay, so nice. Okay. So no problem if she can join us at the end if she wants. But so we will start with the Portuguese experience, introducing Rui do Carmo. He is the coordinator of the Portuguese Domestic Homicide Review team. He is a retired public prosecutor, member of the Center for Family Law of the School of Law of the University of Coimbra, and the invited professor in this university. He is also the coordinator of the Multidisciplinary Technical Commission for Improving Prevention and Combating Domestic Violence. He is professor and deputy director at the Center for Judicial Studies, member of the High Council of the Public Prosecutors. So, Rui, I think you are ready. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Rui do Carmo. I'm the coordinator of the Portuguese Domestic Homicide Review team. We began this experience 5 years ago in consequence of amendment of the domestic violence law in 2015 that was materialized only in 2017. We studied the experience of the countries that has instituted the analysis of homicides in this context, all of them Anglo-Saxon countries, and we build our process and method of analysis in light of the parameters defined by the Portuguese law, which have many differences with the generality of those models, but the same goal. To learn from past cases, experiences, to do better in the future. In 2015, the domestic violence law determined that the public administration services that intervene in the protection of victims of domestic violence carry out a retrospective analysis of the situations of homicides that occurred in the context of domestic violence, and that has already been the subject of a final and unappealable court decision to conclude and allow the implementation of new preventive methodologies in terms of the corresponding procedures. The Domestic Homicide Review team in Portugal is composed by representatives of the public prosecution, who coordinates the team and is named by the Superior Council of the Public Prosecutor, of the Ministry of Justice, which is from the start a forensic pathologist, of the Ministry of Health, which is now a public health doctor, of the Ministry of Labor, Solidarity and Social Security, which is from the start social service technician, of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which is from the start a clinical psychologist who had police experiences, and a representative of the public administration body responsible for the area of citizenship and gender equality, which is now a clinical psychologist. These are the permanent members of the team. In each analysis integrates the team as non-permanent members, a representative of the territorially competent police force in the area in which the event occurred, and whenever there is a child or youth involved, integrates the team a representative of the National Commission for the Promotion of the Rights and Protection of Children and young people. Can also join the team as eventual members, representatives of public entities in the area of health and social security who have been involved in the case, and the representatives of non-governmental organizations that have been involved in the case also. Over the last 3 years in Portugal, were killed 93 persons in this context. 70 women, 5 children, and 17 men. In the last year were killed in this context 23 persons, which corresponds to 27% of the homicides that occurred during the year. 70% of them were women. 53% of the female victims of homicide were killed in this context. The number of homicidal men who commit suicide in these situations is very significant, in line with international statistics, which indicate that about a third of these men commit suicide. During 5 years of activity, the Domestic Homicide Review team prepared and approved 17 reports. that analyzed the concrete cases of homicide and attempted homicide, whose victims were fundamentally women, but also men, and direct recommendations to different sectors and entities, such as the Parliament, the government, the Attorney General of Republics, the police forces, the health services, and the National Support Network for Victims of Domestic Violence. Make recommendations to entities and professionals with responsibilities in the fight against violence against women, against children, and domestic violence, from the analysis of specific cases, is an important responsibility of the Domestic Homicide Review team. The recommendations made so far have been well received and motivated improvements and changes in the law, in the training and work guidelines of different organizations and professionals. It's starting now as provided by law, a team activity evaluation carried out by a multidisciplinary university group of experts. The main objectives of our activity are a better knowledge of the reality, the pattern of behavior, and the determinants of this phenomenon, the best and most effective implementation of the instruments and the mobilization of existing means of intervention in the areas of prevention, protection, support, and repression, promoting concerted action by all public, private, and cooperative and social sectors, structures, and programs that operate in this field, the implementation of new preventive methodologies, and the formulation of recommendations addressing to all entities with responsibilities in any of the areas mentioned to correct errors and overcome shortcomings in the intervention system. Thank you.
So, good morning to all of you. Joanna, I will start now. I don't know if you want to introduce or not, but I excuse my introduction.
I can introduce you, Antonio.
Okay, no problem.
Antonio is a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist with specialization in trauma, policy officer for more than 18 years in an investigation unit, trainer in security forces on topics related to domestic violence, founder member of the Portuguese Domestic Homicide Review team, representative of the Portuguese Home Office in the National Commission for the Promotion of Rights and Protection of Children and Youth. Antonio, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanna. I'm very glad to be here with you this morning. Good morning to all of you. I'm pleased to share our developments on domestic homicide reviews. I will have, I think, half an hour. I expect to do less than that, so I will accelerate a little bit. My intent is to give you a roadmap of all our path that we have been doing in the past 5 years. So beginning with sharing a brief overview of the origin and international developments, like Rui do Carmo told you and Joanna before, Portugal is one of the 8 countries that has the model implemented until now. So as you must know, some of you must know, this all started in 1990 with the first team established in the USA, and nowadays there are about 225 teams operating in the US. The catalyst was the Sharon report in San Francisco, where a victim, female victim, Vina Sharon, was killed near her child's school by her husband, and that in San Francisco it was a huge concern to all the city, and they started an inquiry, and since then the model is implemented in the US. After, in 2002, so 12 years after, Canada established the first team in Ontario. 4 other provinces also have teams created, and other provinces are working in this issue. I don't know if there are more than 5 now, but at the time that we did this PowerPoint presentation, there were these 4 other provinces making moves to establish the model there. I believe that there are more than now. In 2008, New Zealand created their own team, which is, we believe, the most approximate model like our model in Portugal. So they have a team more a kind of similar to our model. In 2009, Australia established the first team in Victoria. As of 2012, teams were also created in 4 other states. 2011, England and Wales introduced legislation establishing domestic homicide reviews, and 2013 they started doing it. Julia Pemberton case was the catalyst to have domestic homicide reviews in England. Frank Mullane, which is her brother and her family, started to ask for a review of the killing of the Julia Pemberton and her son, and Frank Mullane is nowadays a champion on these reviews, as you must know, some of you. 2017, Portugal starts doing domestic homicide reviews. Ireland took its first steps in 2019, and in 2020, Northern Ireland introduced domestic homicide reviews. There are different scopes around different countries. Reviewable case. We, as Dr. Rui told, we do it only with domestic homicides and attempted homicides. But teams differ greatly in terms of number and type of case reviewed, as well as in terms of the methodologies used to review cases. So this is concerned about the legal jurisdiction. It's about the cultural issues. So we have to adapt it to our own country. The golden rule seems to be review with your own team determined capabilities. So we, like Dr. Rui told before, we have some case reviewed. There are teams that review a lot of cases, and we have to emphasize the dangers of trying to be representative and scientific, and to notice that if we do that, like representative analysis, maybe we have too much cases and we do statistics work. If we do qualitative approach, maybe we can do it in-depth review. Domestic homicide review teams typically don't review all deaths caused by or related to or somehow traceable to domestic violence, so we don't have to do it all. It's not possible for some of the teams, like our own in Portugal. And like Joanna also delivered, the problem and the first steps in Portugal, it was in 2012, we learned from the creation of the domestic homicide risk assessment tool that besides trying to do the validation of domestic the risk assessment tool, we reading the cases of domestic homicides, that was an absence of learning and perpetuation of the perceived error detected on those homicides. The outcome was obvious system failure in protecting victims and just holding aggressors to account. So there was tragedies after tragedies and no learning from those cases. In 2013, we started the international exchange with National Domestic Violence Fatality Review Initiative, and after with Professor Neil Webzel and Frank Mullane. In 2015, there was an amendment to the domestic violence law and the opportunity to introduce the model in domestic violence law. And then in 2016, there was a decree that regulates the function of the team. In 2017, the team started working like Dr. Ruiz told you before, and we did it our own instruments. Besides, we added, and we knew that there were some guidances in other countries, but we have to do it to our own cultural differences and legislation specific issues. So the problem is that about 1 in 3 homicides in Portugal is the result of domestic violence. We know that we are a safe country, one of the 3 more safest countries in the world, with a low tax of a low rate of homicides, 85 last year. But we have this need to reduce our priorities, to reduce the number of homicides and to reduce domestic abuse by identifying the deficiencies detected in specific cases, formulating corrections to existing procedures. So we don't have only to do a statistics work, we have to identify what went wrong and to learn from those tragedies. And reading the cases, we know that there are some concerning issues related to the intervention on domestic violence. Domestic homicide reviews have produced that learning. So from the domestic homicide reviews, we understand that the necessary resources are legislation implemented, the government approval that we have, all that, team members present on the team with specialization. There's a need for available information, and that only comes from the law. If we don't have the law that provides that enforce a need for the information, that information doesn't come to the team. We have to have time. Our team, we don't do only the domestic homicide reviews. We have other functions in our institution. So, but we have to have time to do the reports. We have to have collaboration from other entities and our own institutional support. If not, we cannot do, and we cannot have time, for instance, to do the work. Like I told you before, our methodology is not number, it's not quantitative. It's our scope is qualitative, comprehensive, and in-depth analysis of each cases that occur during the designated period considered sufficiently proximal to the homicides. Our information sources for our case are the final criminal proceedings, so the courts have to send it to us to analyze. We ask for sectoral information obtained by all permanent and non-permanent and occasional or eventual members with the consultation of databases of each of the entities. Clarifications that we ask, the team asks from entities and professionals with the knowledge and intervention in the case. So whenever there's a professional that had contact from that institution, we ask from that institution if there's a need to have more information, and to have more close information to recreate the steps made by the victim and perpetrator. We do contacts and we ask and we do interviews with family members, victims or survivors from attempted killings, and sometimes aggressors also. We want to have a more close view if possible, it's not possible in murders or in homicides, but close to 360% of all the path do it by that family. So we have an information collection tool which we translated for this webinar, where we collect all the information regarding the need for information. So we will share, of course, with you all this material, but we have to have this information filed whenever we have the chance. Sometimes it's not possible, but this is our guidance tool to collect information. We have produced, like I told you before, and Dr. Rui also told you, 17 reports, and the structure of the reports are like this. We have a case identification, the characterization of the victim and the perpetrator. We have to share in the report the documentation obtained and analyzed, the information collected, proven facts sent by the court, other information contained in the judicial process that may be interest of the analysis, because the court is focused on the proven facts and on the facts, but there are lateral information sometimes in the judicial case that we needed to obtain more information around the case. We do also proxy hearings of the victim and perpetrator in case of attempted murder, and we put it in the report, of course. And also we request information to other sectors of institutions involved that we understand that were involved with that family. We also do a chronology, a timeline of the case with a graphic representation, which I will show you after. And after all that work, we do our own analysis, and this analysis most of the time is do it by the case worker with the team and the coordinator. And then we draw our conclusions, and the filet mignon of our work, I will say, that is recommendations that have to be implemented. So I will show you the timeline. It's not in Norwegian, neither in English, it's in Portuguese. So I'm sorry for that, but we will do the translation as soon as possible to show you. But the graphic representation make us understand the roadmap that that family did, or that aggressor and victims did it until the homicide. And we learned from this that there are a huge gap that we feel after that was not in the criminal process. So we understand that there are some other issues that we learn and we collect from our work. The outputs until now, since 2017, are 17 reports, like said before. We have a full report which is not anonymized, that is sent to all entities that make up the team in the revised case, and to whom the recommendations are addressed. And there is a public version, anonymous, published on the website and sent to all entities with intervention in the area of domestic violence. 42 recommendations, which are mainly training of professions, risk assessment and management, registration of situations, children and young people, sharing of information and coordination of interventions, law enforcement, legal changes, support for victims, intervention with aggressors, intervention in community. These are some of the recommendations. So from the cases that we have analyzed until now, 68 corresponds to homicide and 32% to attempted homicide. The most common method, or the most common methods of the killings, are with the use of knives and strangulation, or non-fatal strangulation. There are other methods like blunt object, simulation, drowning or suffocation, and firearms. Like in Portugal, we have a very strict law about the firearms. These two killings were done with illegal arms. So the gender of victims and perpetrators, which are like the international studies demonstrates, are mainly the victims are mainly female, and the perpetrators are mainly in vast majority male perpetrators. The average age in our cases on the victims are 50 years old, and in the perpetrators 58 years old. The local of the murders, like it's understandable, most of the time happens in the victim's home, and sometimes in the workplace or near the workplace, which stands, and it's related, of course, with the stalking behavior from the perpetrator. In those cases that we have analyzed, there were 6 children in the households, and we understood from these reviews that also the children remains invisible from all this pain and this attention from the institutions. We draw conclusions about that that are shared in our recommendations. The service entities covered by the recommendations, like it's also common in these cases, are the main entries for the police, for the victims. Police, healthcare, these are the main entries, and then we produce recommendations to the prison services, public security's office, attorney general's office, social security service, and Commission for Citizenship and Gender Equality, Assembly of Republic, government, and national support network for victims of domestic violence. These are some of the recommendations. The common themes are risk assessment, the need to improve risk assessment model, and there are some examples that were in our reports. I will read some of the examples that were drawn by us. This is an example, contrary to what is recommended for high-risk cases, which is a revelation within 3 to 7 days, and despite the clarifications provided by the police regarding the inability of meeting that deadline, the fact is that in the present case, the risk reassessment was only developed 51 days after the first assessment. The reassessment made 3 risk factors included in the initial assessment were not identified. If we did not do the domestic homicide review in this case, we never found that the risk assessment tool was not being properly implemented. The risk assessment or reassessment, this is another conclusion, were carried out by someone, in this case, a police professional, without specific training. Another issue, common theme, risk management, the need to improve risk management. In the case of the perpetrators with a profile similar to B, controlling personality and stalker, it is essential to establish a robust plan to protect victims and stop the stalking, control, and violence. Despite the seriousness of his actions, the aggressor continued to exercise violence, harassment, and control over A, the victim, without any restraint measures being taken. The police and the public prosecutor's office did not use the protection mechanisms or trigger the procedures for the application of coercive measures consistent to high-risk situations that have been detected. So there was an aggressor, high-risk aggressor, and the risk was assessed and no risk management was done by either institutions. Although there were alarming indicators, namely the violent events and the victim's request for help, there was no skills to recognize alarm signs, to connect the dots. They only perceived isolated incidents and individual markers rather than a pattern of behavior. We consider that all actions taken by police and public prosecutor's office were limited to following a formal procedure without proactivity, namely in what concerns risk management, and no effective measures for the protection of victim A and also her doctor were activated. Another common theme, I will not read all of this, but it was concerned to sharing information, the need to improve information sharing. We noticed that there were a lot of, in this case, a lot of entities involved, and no one speaked or shared information with the other entities. So this gave room for the perpetrator to keep up aggression against the family. Another issue that is a common theme is the lack of registration or information missing. This most of the times happens in police work or in health services, where victims ask for help or go to receive treatment, and no information related to domestic violence was registered in some cases. We have a case that a victim went to ask for medical treatment 54 times in a year without any registration of domestic violence related issues. So this is, if we didn't domestic homicide reviews, we didn't have the chance to obtain that information. These are some recommendations. Some of some of recommendations addressed to health. We did these recommendations. Healthcare providers must systematically detect the risk of domestic violence, ensuring that the objective questions about the existence of violence within the family are posed in all screening processes. All health service professionals must document the statements of users about violence to which they may be subjected and the occurrences that in this domain they detected in the exercise of their functions. Whenever there is a well-founded suspicion or confirmation of domestic violence, health professionals must provide existing information on victim support resources and take the necessary security measures, as well as how to report situations to the judiciary system. Health implemented the team's recommendations. Addressed to Attorney General's Office, the Attorney General's Office, given the evolution and dispersion of legal regime and the growing demands in its application and the development that the instruments of action have had, must consider as a factor to increase the present, the coherence and the effectiveness of its action, the implementation of the guidelines that the public ministry services and magistrates must implement regarding the various aspects of all legal regime, and intervention in the field of domestic violence through the preparation of hierarchical document and group practices. The Attorney General Office implemented the team's recommendation. There was a directive issued for the action of the public prosecution in the investigation of domestic violence. To the police forces, risk assessment should, as a rule, be carried out by specialized professionals in the field of domestic violence. If it's not feasible in the specific case, it must be supervised by a specialized professional within a period that should not exceed 48 hours. The implementation of the protection measures and the security plan defined for the victim, as well as the incidents of its implementation, must be recorded in a specific document, which will be together with the criminal process, so that it is possible to know and control its effective execution. In the handbook for police criminal investigation of domestic violence, that must occur in 72 hours after knowledge of the case, the team's recommendation were implemented. Addressed to the Assembly, and I'm almost ending my presentation, in the addressing the Assembly of the Republic and the government, it is verified in the judicial practice that often the mistreatment is practiced in the presence of a child, a youth, a minor. In this case, we call it minor. In particular, in the situation described in paragraphs, I will not read all of these. The understanding prevails that only the aggravating circumstances provided in the paragraph 2 of the same article apply. So there was a misunderstanding of the judicial interpretation of the law. So we had to do a clarification. We asked for a clarification for the children and the presence of children of or a young person to be identified as a domestic violence mistreatment. So this recommendation was implemented in the law. The team's recommendation was implemented in the law in 2021. Children are full rights victims of domestic violence. So this is my the main results of the recommendations. So other results, we have exchanges, international exchanges, contact with entities to which the recommendations are addressed to, and requests for meetings which with the entities to know if the recommendations are well received and the steps that they are doing to implement the recommendations. We have had dialogues with various disciplines from the knowledge, psychology, law, social work, sociology, and criminology. Like Dr. Rui said before, we are having an evaluation of our work which is being done by a university. We had 3 parliamentary hearings following published reports, expression of concern by representatives of political parties with support and praise for the team's work, participation in numerous trainings, actions in various sectors. The team is invited as a trainer by the Center of Judicial Studies, police, entities of the National Support Network for Victims of Domestic Violence, universities, and the reports are part of the pedagogical resources of the entities mentioned above and others. And finally, the reports and recommendations have been mentioned in some orders of the public prosecution. This is my presentation. Thank you so much. I hope that I didn't take more than the time that I've been assigned to. Thank you so much. I will be happy to answer to questions whenever there's a chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio, for so good explanation about your mission and the team mission. And now I will give the floor to Maria Cristina Mendonça. She's a senior forensic pathologist, chief coordinator of the forensic disaster management unit at the Portuguese National Institute of Legal Medicine, delegate of the Ministry of Justice at the National Committee of Civil Protection, and a permanent member of the Portuguese Domestic Homicide Review Team. Cristina, the floor is yours.
Eu vou partilhar.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you, sharing this Portuguese experience. I will tell you about one of our 17 cases my colleague Antonio told you about. This was a case that began in 2018. It's our case 6/2018, and it finished at 2020. And I'll tell you some details about that, but for sure this will be a very summary report about everything that we could find in our review. Then I will read you our conclusions and our recommendations about this particular case. So this case concerned a homicide of a 61-year-old woman, we named A, perpetrated by her partner named B. He was aged 40 at the time of the murder, and
Cristina?
It's a homicide review. Yeah?
We're having some delays, but
Okay.
I think now it's okay with you, Cristina, but now it's okay.
Is that okay? Okay. I was telling you
Yeah.
about the intervenience of this case, and just saying that the murder occurred in January, in the beginning of January 2016. So all the information collected, I'll give you a short overview about it. Both B and A lived together as partners, sharing home, food, and intimate life since 2006. A's grandson, which we named C, was also living with the couple. In the year that preceded A's death, it became frequent that B would tell A during arguments he would kill her, motivated by jealousy, drug addiction, and alcohol abuse. Then, on January 2016, one afternoon, B saw A exiting the local police station together with a lawyer and suspected she had once again filed a complaint against him. So later on, during an argument, B grabbed A by the hair, forced her to her knees, and frequently punched her in the mouth. A cried out for help. On hearing the screaming, C came to help his grandmother, but as he saw the situation, he jumped off the window and ran out for help, returning straight away with a neighbor. When the neighbor entered the front yard, asking loudly what was going on, B showed up at the door, dragging A by the neck and holding a knife, a kitchen knife. The neighbor stepped out the yard waiting for the police, and in the meanwhile, B struck A with several knife blows, one of which directed to the neck. So when the police arrived, A's body was lying next to the door with several sharp and piercing wounds located all over the face, neck, thorax, and upper limbs. Cause of death was due to the complete section of right internal jugular vein. So this is the frame of this case. Coming from information collection we did in different sectors, we could know that B came from a culturally and financially disadvantaged background, having abandoned school prematurely. Then he started working in construction while he was also involved in crimes of petty theft as part of a group motivated by the increased use of drug abuse, use of drugs, and his mother's death, which ultimately led him to prison for 3 years, a 3-year sentence. He then took several job opportunities and settled in other regions, developing a range of activities and changing employment very often. A new job prompted B to move to a new town where he engaged on a relationship with A and moved in with her. A's professional and economical stability level contrasted with B's unsteadiness and job insecurity. I must tell you that A was a school teacher. So the couple relationship dynamics acutely deteriorated over time, leading to verbal and physical abuse whenever he drank too much or used drugs. In such situations, he would show frustration, jealousy, and suspicion A was being unfaithful to him, and he would display a threatening and controlling attitude towards her. During this his free time, and without a structured activity, B would maintain contact with other drug addicts, fact which did not help him controlling his addiction habits and had a negative impact on his behavioral pattern. As a regular user of alcohol and drugs, B depended on A's financial support. So, with the police command, we could collect information of previous criminal proceedings that were concerning actions perpetrated by B on previous occasions prior to the homicide under review that occurred, as I told you before, in 2016. There were 14 proceedings, and these, they all report criminal proceedings due to violent behavior directed towards A, her daughter and her grandson, as well as other people that had any connection with her since 2006. All but 2 of the inquiries were dismissed without any consequences to B. Both inquiries that went on was one in 2009. This inquiry was on domestic violence, temporarily suspended and dismissed the next year after court mandate had been fulfilled. And the other one in 2015, some month before the murder, B was convicted, but he was convicted about 3 months after the homicide to a cumulative sentence of imprisonment by the practice in simultaneous of a crime of qualified domestic violence, offense to physical integrity, and qualified damage. Now, information about the victim, about A, which we could collect, concerning the social security sector, is that on April 2010, A's brother contacted over the phone to a domestic violence social security team requesting for support. He reported that A was a victim of domestic violence by her partner, that she had a grandson under her care, and that A's partner used drugs. He also reported that A had been filled 3 domestic violence reports by that time with the police, who advised her to leave the house, and that A had eventually left home as a consequence of the violence to seek refuge in a work colleague's house located in another town. The team proposed an immediate safety plan, which included the immediate moving to a shelter home, being later housed autonomously, and requests to be transferred to another school. But A rejected the whole suggested safety plan, reiterating her emotional connection with B, recognizing her responsibility on caring for him, and the hope she had on him changing his behavior. She didn't accept any of these suggestions of the safety plan. Now, about C, about the child, the information we have is concerning the judicial process and the social security sector. We knew that in June 2006, the Commission of the Protection of Children and Young People, which in Portuguese we call PCJ, decided to place, he was 3-year-old by then, C under the provisional care of his grandmother A. This was by the time A began her relationship with B. On April 2010, the CPCJ was informed that A had been beaten by B, and she learned, she feared, and she would say she was fearing both for her life and for her grandsons. So a judicial process protection and promotion started as a consequence. At that time, C was still under his grandmother's care, and he would be for much more time, given that his mother had immigrated and his father did not maintain any contact with him, living in another town. This process was dismissed following decision in March 2021, because it was understood that the dangerous situation triggering the process was no longer there. This has been a very tricky case with too much details to take your time by now. I'll just read the conclusions we had at AEB. 14 legal procedures were initiated due to violent behavior displayed by B, targeting not only A, but also the other members of the household and the community. All but 2 of the inquiries motivated by aggression towards A were dismissed without any consequences to B. One in 2009 on domestic violence, temporarily suspended and dismissed. In 2010, after court mandate had been fulfilled. Another in 2015, also on domestic violence, which concluded with the conviction of B in 2016 after A's death. In our conclusion, we say that in the scope of domestic violence, criminal intervention aims to consolidate the norm that punishes and forbids ill treatment, restrain and prosecute resocialization action on the aggressor and protect the victim. In this case, the protection of A could not be achieved, and B boosted a feeling of impunity as a consequence of the lenience regarding B's behavior, the lack of proactivity evidence in the criminal investigation, and the shortenings of the judicial action. It was a very, very severe situation. Second conclusion, we wrote that A did not accept the safety plan that she was proposed on 2010 by the Social Security Services, because this would involve leaving the area of residence and leaving her job. The endeavors by the service were limited to a phone call followed by a physical meeting at the time when A was away from her usual home and immediately before B left for a 4-year period. In this timeline, which I won't show you, B aggressor left the home for 4 years. He moved town, but then he came back later on. So we wrote in this conclusion that the inconsistency of the intervention action after the criminal proceedings and the proposal made to leave area of residence and employment may have led A to feel unprotected. On the contrary, the collection of evidence and the robustness of coercion measures as a way of ensuring the containing and distancing of B, in particular considering the geographic characteristics of the territory where they both lived, were beneficial to protect A and create the conditions for her to accept the support in recognizing her personal, family and professional life without forcing her to leave home, her job and the region where she lived. They lived in an island, so this was particularly difficult for them to be apart one of each other. The third conclusion stated that B kept abusing alcohol and drugs, surrounded himself by other addicts, a factor that may have influenced his aggressiveness and the degradation of his relationship with A. The lack of information from healthcare, because we couldn't manage to have information from the health sector. So we wrote that the lack of information from healthcare did not allow any reference to support to be found throughout the review, be it medical or psychological in nature. A single
Please, Christina, be brief, please.
Yes, I'm finishing.
Okay, thank you so much.
A single episode was noted at the healthcare center caused by an aggression against A in 29, which led to a criminal inquiry. There is also no record that B has ever referred to a rehabilitation program to address his well-known addiction problems, which were alcohol and drugs. And I have my late, there is the late conclusion, which has to do, the fourth conclusion, which is the last, has to do with the involvement of a child in this case. We had this child, C, he was the victim's grandson, and he was put under her care since he was 3-year-old until, and from that age until 13, when the murder occurred, he was experiencing from all violence caused by B. Besides the context established during the proceedings of protection and promotion of his rights, first by the CEPCJ and then by the court, no reference about supporting B offered to this child was found on the record and data collection, nor were found any effective measures for the preservation of its safety and promotion under proper conditions, fostering the health and growth of development. This was despite A, having repeatedly expressed her concern about her grandson's safety in this violent context. This child witnesses aggressions endured by both his mother and grandmother, including the ones culminating in murder. Say objects, objects and equipment being destroyed by B, and was the target of threats. Not only the psychological consequences of his behaviors B suffered were not excessive, but also those were not given the due criminal relevance. Such behaviors are qualified as ill treatment committed by B against the child, repeated, intense, and severe psychological ill treatment every time the child was forced to watch the aggression perpetrated upon his mother and grandmother, and include the practice of domestic violence according to our legislation, penal code. However, this was not taken into consideration in the criminal procedures that followed. These were our conclusions about the case, and finally we reported 3 recommendations. The first addressed to the Public Prosecutor's Office and the criminal police bodies, which had to do with this manual for police bodies that would to follow criminal investigation in the 72 hours of the ill treatment. My colleague Antonio talked to you about this. The other recommendation was addressed to the Public Prosecutor General and the late addressed to the Parliament and to the government, which my colleague Antonio talked.
Thank you so much.
About.
Christina, we don't have too much time. We have to.
I would finally thank you all for your attention, and just telling you the center from Frank Mullane, which says domestic homicide reviews eliminates the past to make the future safer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you for this detailed information about the reported cases. And now I would like to introduce the Norwegian Intimate Partner Homicide Committee, here represented by Ragnhild Helen Hannun. I think I can spell it correctly. She is a professor of public law at the University of Oslo, Faculty of Law, and head of the Norwegian Intimate Partner Homicide Committee. She is a Norwegian jurist, academic administrator, and women's rights leader. She has carried out multidisciplinary research in criminal and sociology of law on various subjects like evidence, sexualized violence, euthanasia, sentencing, and forced marriage. At the present, she teaches criminal law and procedure. Please, I will give the floor to Ragnhild. Thank you. Can you listen, Ragnhild? I think you don't have sound.
Is it better now?
Yes, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Now it's better.
Yeah,
It's better.
thank you.
Thank you.
So, Thank you, and I'll make it short because I think our findings are quite similar to those reported by Camaro, Castano, and Mendoca. So, and you will find the online and English summary of the report made by the committee. That will be more fulfilling than my presentation. So I'll make it short and give some time for the discussion. Okay, so I have a presentation. I'll start to. There, so we made a public report or a white paper on intimate partner homicides delivered in December 2020. And the committee was, it was a broad committee with all kinds of professionals and also NGOs represented in the committee. The mandate of the committee was to review intimate partner homicide cases to uncover whether or not, whether and possibility to what extent and how the public support services and the police have failed in the prevention of these homicides. And I have to say, like in Portugal, there are few homicides in general. And about the same amount, a quarter or 1/3 of the homicides committed in Norway is intimate partner homicides. And according to the National Criminal Investigation Service, 231 people have been killed by the partner or ex-partner in the last 30 years. And that taken into account these numbers.
Sorry, can you share it bigger?
Pardon?
If you can share the presentation bigger to show all the participants the data.
Okay, I'll. Is it better this way? Yeah. But you can have the presentation afterwards, and then it will be easier to read. These numbers are quite tiny, I can see. But here you have the numbers. In average, it's 8 intimate partner homicides, 7 or 8 each year in Norway. That taken into account that in 2019 it was 26 homicides overall in Norway. So I think the pattern is quite similar to the Portuguese case. And the committee reviewed criminal cases or documents. We didn't do interviews. We only reviewed the documents in the criminal cases, but they were actually quite big, or they had a lot of documents, these cases, in average 1,800 pages, but I think the largest one was approximately 7,000 pages. So there were a lot of documentation in the cases. And in all the 19 cases that we reviewed, there were intimate partner violence before the murder or the homicide in all the 19 cases. And also a very significant finding was that the victims and the perpetrator had faced a number of problems in their living conditions. It was not only the intimate partner violence that was they were facing. They had a number of challenges connected to their living conditions. Drug and alcohol abuse, as Maria showed us a case about, psychiatric problems, lack of work, and different kind of problems. And in all the cases, because these cases ended in murders, the police or the public support services have failed to implement preventive measures that could reduce the risk of homicides. So I think I'll jump to the recommendations, because this was not a permanent committee. It was a committee that had that existed for 2 years and reviewed cases within those 2 years, and they should and the committee's mandate was to recommend some changes in the systems, or in the police service, in the health service, and so on.
Henrik, just a comment. We are seeing just the same slide. It is okay? No,
Are you seeing
the same slide, I think, has frozen.
No, doesn't it change now?
No.
No?
Homicide in Norway. The blue and black one.
You have to put it in the presentation mode.
Yes, I think I had to stop the sharing. Can you see my presentation now? Changing?
No. Please
Maybe it's
share
coming.
it. Yes, we'll have to wait sometimes a little bit.
Okay. So can you see it now? Changing?
No.
Then I stop the presentation. It's okay. It's okay.
problem.
And we did these reviews of cases, and we were not a permanent commission. We have, in overall, we had 70 recommendations for which 30 of them was general recommendations, and 39 was specific recommendations to the police service, to the prosecutor, and so on. And these recommendations are quite similar to what Carmo, Constano, and Mendoza have already spoken about. So it's really not necessary. It's about risk assessment. It's about having good routines and so on, and it's actually quite similar. But one of our perhaps most the recommendation that can make most impact was a recommendation of making a permanent commission like you have in Portugal, to have a permanent commission to review cases. And I'm not sure how much you know about the Norwegian system. We have not a separate law on domestic violence. Domestic violence is regulated and included in the penal code. And we have a separate law on shelters or crisis centers. That's a separate law that say that every municipality should provide a shelter service, but we have no separate law on domestic violence, and we have no permanent commission. So one of the recommendation, or the first recommendation from our committee, was that we should establish a permanent commission that did the reviews on a permanent basis with more or less the same professions included as you have in Portugal. So we can learn here from the Portuguese experience, and we have, but on top of that, the committee had 69 other recommendations, some of them small, some of them big, some of them concerning knowledge and competence in the police and the support systems. We saw many examples of poor or lack of communication and confidence between the users and the support system. We saw many examples of that the support system didn't use interpreters as they should. They use, in some cases, even the perpetrator as an interpreter. When the woman went to the doctor, the man who actually was the perpetrator was together with her at the doctor's. So we have lots of suggestions trying to avoid those situations that we saw in the cases. But all this you can read in the English summary. It's available quite easily. And we also had some comments on, or recommendations on, because some of these areas are regulated more in guidelines than in rules. And when the service had to prioritize between something that is stated in a guideline and something that is stated as a binding rule, they will prioritize following the rule. So the suggestion was that more of the regulation is done in as rules and laws. Yeah, and we also saw lots of examples of that the services didn't exchange information. That the police, they knew some parts of the story, the health service knew some parts of the story, and there were no exchange of information between the services, and the lack of exchange of information actually caused a situation where none of the services had information or enough information about the case. So, and then we have a lot of quite specific recommendations for example, the police and the prosecution service, that they should use a special risk assessment tool, and they should be trained in using that risk. They are using it, but they should use it on a regular or a regulated basis with trained officers. So, but you can, I see now it's 11:59, and if we should have any time to discuss this, perhaps I should stop, and then you can have my presentation that was not so very successful shown to you today, and I can also send you the link from the report. But I also know that now the Ministry of Justice is working on establishing a permanent commission in Norway. So I think from I saw from the list of participants that they are present and are learning also from the Portuguese experience. But in Norway we have some permanent commissions like that for car accidents, air accidents, faults in the health services and so on. And we have to look at different examples to figure out how to how to establish and in what frame and with what regulations should the permanent commission be established. Yeah, I think I stop there.
Thank you, Ragnhild. We will share all the presentations to all participants, don't worry about that. Now we are on time, in a good time to open the space to the questions. We are a lot of participants. What I will ask you is to put your name in the chat, and then we will give the floor to put the question, please. Just also mention if it's to the Portuguese or to the Norwegian team. Or if you want to share here a comment or a recommendation, please feel free to talk. Antonio.
Thank you, Ragnhild, for your presentation. I would like you to ask, I understood that your commission or your committee was doing the reviews for 2 years. So, and you produced a lot of recommendations based on those 2 years of reviews. Can you tell us how many reviews did you do? How many cases were?
Oh yeah, because that was lack of my presentation, because it was 19 cases, and they were not only for those two from those 2 years. They were going further back. So we only looked at cases where the perpetrator was convicted, as they were convicted for intimate partner homicides, and we went back in years. We were working for 2 years, but the cases we reviewed, the 19 cases, were from 8 years back.
Okay, and sorry to ask another question, because I'm curious about that. So what was the source of information that you had, what was available to you to do the reviews? Did you contact with, for instance, with professionals, with families and family members, or it was a review based only on documents? I'm also curious to know about that, if you may.
It was only made on documents. We did not do any interviews.
Okay.
But our suggestion or recommendation are that the government establish a committee that actually can work the same way as you.
Okay.
But we only used, there were, and you know, in the court cases, they can be documented. This differs a bit around the world, but court cases are usually very well documented. So there were, the biggest case was 7,000 pages, document pages. So they were well documented, but of course you lack something if you don't speak to the persons around the victim, the persons involved, if it's, and so on. And our recommendation are that the government establish a permanent commission, because there are some disadvantages by only looking at the documents, and we were very well aware of it.
Yeah. So I would like just to comment and give the space to other participants that from our experience, when we do the review only based on documents, it's really away from all the information, because sometimes, mainly in domestic homicides followed by suicide from the perpetrator here in Portugal, the case most of the times, if there's not a history of criminal proceedings, there are a lot of information missing, and the family members and the professionals from other areas that are involved can contribute a lot to the roadmap that this persons did. Thank you so much, Ragnhild, for your clarification and presentation once again.
Yeah, and actually the number of persons committing suicide. Was it 30% in the Portuguese case?
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost the same in Norway. But in the cases we reviewed, we have had no such cases of people committing suicide, because then there are no court case, and there are no documentation. So
no learning from that.
Yeah. So but we didn't have any of those cases in our 19 cases.
Yeah. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much. And also Vera is proposing that if someone in the Norwegian audience want to ask a question in Norwegian, she can help and translate. And now also Taran, she has a question. Please, Taran.
Yeah, I was just wondering because in the beginning, I think it was you, Antonio, you said something about that the countries that have these kinds of teams, that the structure of the team varies quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I was wondering why, because it seems that you and Brunhild are you agree that there are, the similarities between the cases in various countries are so, they're almost 100% similarity in between countries. So why are the structures of the teams, why do they differ culturally? If the caseload is so similar, do you know?
I believe it's from the judicial system, based on judicial system, and I believe mainly in the US they have a lot of teams operating, and some of them are not permanent. They are based on specific case. They are built on that specific case, and they are dismembered after. So they sometimes reunite 20 or 30 people around the case, and they discuss on top of the case and bringing people from the community, and more, I would like to say, more democratic, but less informed, I think, also with less specialized people around. So I think it's about the philosophy of the country, also about the way to look at the cases. In the US they involve more the community and less the professionals trained, and after, if there's a permanent team, they do training. But other places like England and Australia and New Zealand, I think they are quite similar to us, and they bring the specialized persons, and then they bring other people to, if they need to be there. And most of the time, but there have been changings around the world. For instance, in England now they are trying to, they think that maybe the children must be listening to. So it's according to philosophy. For us, it will be very difficult to do that. But we are bringing all the information that we can. If you can bring people that have the information. So I think it's cultural and judicial main issues that difference the teams.
And the systems for organizing governmental activity differs a lot.
Yeah.
And they have also learned, because when they started off in England with their commissions, they were much more eager to place guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are doing that, you won't have, if you can lose your job, if you tell something, I failed to do this, or we didn't respond in time or anything. And if guilt is placed and you are in danger of losing your job, of course you won't tell the truth to the committee. So that didn't function. And then they learn and they reorganize the committee. They have also a committee in Sweden organized through the health or the social services, or an entity in the social services that has, you can see some advantages, but also some disadvantages by doing it like that. So our committee, our recommendation that that the government establish a committee, independent committee with somewhat more or less the same expertise that are in the Portuguese and in some of the other systems committees.
Yeah, and one of the difficult responding to that and to Taran also is that if you have teams operating with no legal basis and no government approval, it's more difficult for you to assess the information, and it's more difficult for you to implement the recommendations because it's not based on the needs or recognized by the government to with the legitimacy to implement the recommendations. So to have legal framework and to have recognized experienced team based and permanent will be easier to implement recommendations, I believe. So from the connection that we have around the world, we notice that there are some places that are with lots of difficulties to implement recommendations because they have those differences.
Thank you. And now we have a question in the chat, but I will ask Renate to put the question to the Portugal team. Are you there?
Yeah. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. So my question was to the Portugal team, because there was a mention in the other case about the safety plan was rejected by the later victim. And I was curious if, because I don't think it was mentioned, do you have tools like, for example, a mobile assault alarm for the victim, where they can press an emergency button to be in contact with the police? And do you also have the reverse alarm that the one that is used in some cases in Norway, it looks like an ankle bracelet for the offender to keep him out of certain areas of contact with the victim? I was curious if you have and use these tools also in Portugal.
Yeah, I don't know if any of my partners want to address this question, but I'm happy to do it. Christina, do you want to do it, or Dr. Rui, do you want to answer? Okay, so we have that system also. We have that system also. We have the bracelet that is put it when in the perpetrator, when the case is considered risk case, or if there's a need to move away the perpetrator from the victim. That happens before a prison measure. And we have also the alarm for the victim, yes. Sometimes we use it only the alarm, and sometimes they mix together if there's a high risk case, and yes, we do it.
I would just wanted to add that in this particular case, they lived in a very tiny island, so this was not very, very functional. I mean, they couldn't use it.
Hmm. But it was not for that they didn't use the system, didn't propose even that, so that it was a founding that we had. It was very, very hard, very low intervention and very disconnected intervention between the agencies. So even the measures were not equationated to be put in place. So.
Taran? You are without sound, Taran.
Sorry. This is a follow-up question to my first question to Antonio, because I mean, you have experience. This whole process is ahead of us in Norway. So I would like to ask you, albeit there are cultural differences and structural differences, would you say that there are certain things or certain structures that need to be in place for such a committee to succeed? can you pinpoint maybe one or two prerequisites for to ensure that these committees are successful, and in terms of actually making a change and actually increasing the protection of women and getting the numbers down?
Yeah, I think one of the main prerequisites it's the access to information and legal basis for that you can be mandated to have access, and then specialized people composing the main team, like you understood from our presentation. We have a main team, and then there are other people that join us to have that. So if you have legal basis to do and to collect the information, and then you have specialized persons with training in domestic violence, maybe you have the tools to start doing it. So I think that's and time to do that. I believe that it depends after, if you want, because you have like us not too many cases, you can do in-depth reviews and learning more from the in-depth reviews than quantitative or statistics around the cases. It's more helpful because you have that. So yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add something. In this particular case, besides all the efforts we've done, we could not have any, we didn't have access to health information. So sometimes it doesn't work that well, although we have a structured team by law. This. Thank you.
Okay. Can I ask Maria, why didn't you have the health information?
It wasn't sent for us. Besides our
okay, so you don't have, the committee doesn't have the right for all information that can be connected to the case?
In fact, we do, but sometimes it doesn't work for some reason.
Okay, thank you.
Sometimes it's based on the health confidential information. Health information maybe sometimes cannot be shared, and based on that confidential knowledge of information to be shared, sometimes medical staff, psychologists and psychiatrists don't share information that we ask for. It was not the case, but I believe that sometimes it's the main reason that they justify not to sharing information. Yeah, sometimes they don't full information.
So that's perhaps something we can learn from your experience, that the committee need to have access to all information, no matter how the health service are thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
Because this could be useful information.
Yeah, if you try to detect what's the main points, that the main difficulties or sectors that you have a reason to understand that it will be difficult to assess information. From our point of view, health, it's been the most difficult place to assess information, based on the rights of the person that receives medical care. So that's, I don't know if it's the same in Norway. So that is the main issues, that differences countries from countries to countries. And sometimes it's very easy to assess information in some countries, sometimes even with legal basis, and sometimes it's very hard, even if you don't, even if you have it. So it's that. Yeah.
So we have another question for Stein, for both the Portuguese and the Norwegian team. Please, Stein.
Thank you. I would like to start off by thanking you all for very interesting presentations. My name is Stina. I work with the Norwegian police in risk assessment of partner violence. In Norwegian context, it is my experience that partner homicides has been a focus area for some time, and the Norwegian police are now expected to risk assess all intimate partner violence. And I was just curious, on this background, what are your thoughts, both the Norwegian and the Portuguese teams, on either including all domestic homicides in these reviews or limiting them to only look at the partner homicides? Thank you.
I can perhaps answer for the recommendation from the Norwegian committee, and that was to include all domestic homicides. But still there can be homicides in someone's home that are not domestic, but when they are a closer relationship, that you can sort of have violence in front, then it's possible to bring it in, but it also can be some reasons to divide between this situation, but there can also be reasons to include all of them. But then at least I think it had to be a domestic surrounding of it, so that it can't be that the 40-year-old son come home one day to the parents' home where he doesn't live and kill the parents. That would not that would be something else. Then, but if they live together, there can be good reasons for including all of them, but there also can be some reasons for seeing them as different types of homicides. So I have no sort of concluding answer to that question, actually.
Here, yes.
If I could just follow up to the Portuguese teams.
In Portugal, we analyze all homicides, all domestic homicides, And there's an important note. In Portugal, we begin the analysis only when the court process is ended. We start the analysis only when the court process have the final decision, because we don't want interfering with the court process.
And that's a main difference between teams and countries. For instance, in England and in the US, they can start doing the review right after the murder. So that's a big difference. We cannot do that because for legal reasons, and we cannot do that. For instance, there are teams that do not only homicides, like how we do the review of homicides, like Dr. Rui said, homicides, attempted homicides, and also not only intimate partner homicides, but if, for instance, if there's we didn't have until now, fortunately, but for instance, if there's a police officer that goes to a household that gets killed in a domestic intervention, we can review that case also. But there are teams around the world that review suicide cases that have a prior history of domestic violence. I think it's a good way to do it also, especially if you have the law to do that, and if you can do that, and if you have if you don't have too much cases to review. Fortunately, Norway doesn't have too much. They have it's too much. 8 it's too much, but you know, 1 it's too much. But I know that I'm talking about only about the numbers. So it's up to you to understand what makes more sense to you to do. Okay.
And now Now we have a question from Vera to the Portuguese team.
Hello. Wait, sorry. We are sitting in the same room here at the Norwegian Directorate for Children and Family Affairs. First of all, I just want to say thank you for interesting presentations. And I have a question for the Portuguese team. It was not that clear to me, but you have recommendations and conclusions. And I was just wondering, to what level and to what actors do you direct these recommendations and conclusions? Is it both to the national level or to the local level? Is it on the local level only the police, or is it also other actors of the child welfare system? Can you not hear me, Antonio?
Your sound is very weak, so please try to improve your sound if you may.
Okay, I can just write it.
And now we are listening well. Try to do that. Don't move your head. Just project your voice in that direction, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Now to the other way.
Okay, here?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
good. That's good.
We were just wondering, you have these recommendations and conclusions, and we were just wondering, to what national level and to what actors do you direct these recommendations? Is it both the national and the local level? Or is it, and to what actors on the local level? Is it only the police or other actors, just like the child welfare?
Our recommendations, it's implies national application. So
Okay.
we learn from the specific case, and we try to draw recommendations that can be applied to any case of domestic violence at national level, and we do recommendation to any entities that were involved on that specific case, that were involved in the case, and can be applied or implemented by those institutions. So national application, general application. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would just like to add, if there's no any other question by now, I will just like to add, because Ragnhild told an important question too. We have the preoccupation not to point fingers. It's not our way to do things. You know, we have to learn from that tragedy. We are not focusing on the professional that did the mistake or the deficiency. No, we are trying to improve the system, not to point fingers to anyone. Sometimes it's difficult not to understand that this was a fault or something like from the police or from the health system. Sometimes the media brings that to attention. It's not our purpose. The recommendation needs to be implemented without pointing fingers to any institution or anyone, just to improve. Okay, just that.
Can I just ask something then, Antonio? That, you know, seeing the process now in Norway, that we, for instance, the Ombud and Ragnhild and other stakeholders, we should emphasize vis-a-vis the government that this should be trust-based work, where the goal is the process towards learning from our mistakes, basically.
Yeah.
Rather than pointing fingers, this is all about just learning from our mistakes, you know, to improve our work.
Yes, of course. That's the basis of the model. Yeah. And to honor, there are some partners from Anglo-Saxon countries that do this a lot, and to honor honor the victims and the process, and to be full understanding the path that the victim went, and to try, because they don't have the voice to speak now. Most of them have died, so they don't have the chance to reveal. So we have to give them a chance, and to to imagine that she's sitting in the table with us, trying to correct what we are trying to find. And if we can do that, it's impossible, but if we can do that to be present, to be close to the victim wishes, it will be fine, because she's dead already most of the times.
Thank you.
I don't know if you have more questions. So a special thanks to the Portuguese and to the Norwegian team here, particularly Rui, do Carmo, Antonio and Cristina, also for this excellent presentation. And just to mention that the Portuguese team is going to a training session is going to Norway on September, I think, to make a training session to these professionals. So you will have the opportunity to meet all the Portuguese team and to learn more at these issues. I don't know if you want to add something. Also from the program partner, Taran.
No, not really. I just want to thank everyone. Ronhild had to leave us. I knew that, but I think for all of us, and especially for us in Norway, I mean, this is perfect timing for us, because, like I said, this is a process that's ahead of us, as opposed to in Portugal, where you actually have the experience. So I feel very privileged, and it's really important for all the stakeholders to hear your experience and to be able to draw from your experience and your knowledge in our efforts to establish a similar mechanism here in Norway. So thank you very, very much to all of you.
Thank you. It was a privilege also.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Thank you.